Hey there, YouTube friends and family. It's a guy with beard, guns, and gear. On this wonderful midday filming. It's been a while since we put out a video. Just been very busy, and I'm sure you guys can relate. Everybody's got stuff going on in their lives. What we are going to look at today is the absolutely, in my opinion, legendary, iconic 303 Lee Enfield rifle, which we have an okay version of it here. This has a great sentimental value to me. This one here belonged to my grandfather, who immigrated from the UK in the 70s. And this was in his possession right up until, the day that he died. My uncle took it over, and then my uncle is not into hunting or shooting anymore, so I managed to get my hands on this. And it's got more sentimental value than collector value, because as you can see, it has been sporterized. So I would love to have an original version of this, but I have what I have. But I love this one anyway, just because of the sentimental value of it. So we're gonna go over the Lee Enfield 303, a little bit of the history of it. If you guys are like me, you love the history, you love what happened to the rifles during, before, after. I love battle rifles that were designed for the battlefield. I talked about the Carcano on one of my previous videos. You should go check that out if you haven't seen it. They're really cool rifles, and a completely different approach than the Mr. Lee designed 303 British that I have here with me. So, we'll talk a little bit about the Lee Enfield 303 British cartridge in the short magazine rifle configuration that we have here. So, as I said, it's a bolt action rifle. Okay, it's magazine fed, and it was considered a repeating rifle. Okay, what does that mean? It means you didn't have to specifically load a cartridge in between shots. You could repeat a shot just by moving, the bolt and cycling another round. The British Empire, Commonwealth used these. I mean, arguably, you could say that they're still in service, because there are some, I think Bangladesh Police Force is what I read, still has these in service. And variants of this were still used by the British Army in a sniper configuration until very recently. So, they came out in 1895, was the very first production model, and they were produced and used right up until 1957 by the British Empire Commonwealth countries. In fact, our Canadian Rangers were using this in Northern Defense until very recently. They just were replaced, I think it was 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, by the Tika rifle with the 308. So 303 cartridge was still being used out there in a military capacity by our Rangers. So SMLE, what does that stand for? Short Magazine Lee Enfield. Okay, this is the one that most people are familiar with, but like I said, not particularly in this configuration, because it has been sporterized. And we'll go over the reasons for that. But it's seen service in virtually every conflict that the British Empire has been involved with, back from its early production in 1895 right up until present day. You could see one of these picked up, being used by somebody as a battle rifle, as it was designed. I mean, just hundreds of conflicts. You have to remember, go back to 1895, where the Brits were and where their interests were. And they made sure that their allies were armed with the good old 303. How many of these? 17 million of these in all its variants. The Mark 1, the Mark 3, the number 4. 17 million of these were produced. That is insane to think that 17 million of these rifles are probably still around and still, I mean, they're battlefield rifles. It's very difficult to destroy them. They're a chunky rifle. I mean, compared with the Carcano that was, like 7.5 pounds, these ones here are weighing in over 9 pounds. You have your Mark 1, which is like 9.25 pounds. The Mark III, a little under 9 pounds, 8.73 pounds. And then you have the number 4 the number 4 Mark 1, which is just a little over 9 pounds, 9.06 pounds. Barrel length, I mean, they put big, long, heavy barrels on them. Most of the overall rifle length is in around the 44.5-inch mark, with the exception there was what's kind of commonly referred to as the jungle carbine version, and that was a lot shorter. I think that was around a 40-inch, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, the number 5 Mark 1, the shortest version that you can get out there was a 39.5-inch with an 18.8 barrel, but most of these have a 25.2-inch barrel. Very long barrel, very heavy barrel. As you can see, you can see how thick that barrel is. I mean, they made these things to really last, to be robust. The cycling on them still works very well to this day. I mean, it's smooth. It's probably seen millions and millions of rounds. This one here is in actually very good condition, though. My uncle did a very good job of preserving it, in that occasionally he would take it out, oil it, make sure that, the rifling on the inside of the barrel, the chamber area was all nice and greased up. There was a few dust bunnies on it, but it wasn't so bad. So what was the effectiveness of this rifle? Well, I mean, they said a typical soldier could fire 20 to 30 rounds a minute, which is very respectable, especially when you consider most of your militaries, with the exception of maybe the U.S. military, which entered the war very late in the stages, was the only ones using a semi-automatic. Everybody else had bolt actions, and some of them were single feed. So this one here, you had 5-round charger clips that you could see through the feed trays here, that you could load 5 rounds at a time, or you could load them 1 at a time into the box magazine. Again, 10-round capacity on that. The design of itself, very rudimentary. I mean, it was a partnership between the inventor, which was Mr. Lee, and it was produced by I think it's BSAF company in Enfield, England, which is where it gets its name, the Lee Enfield. What do we got here? So let's talk about this particular model. Okay, so how did this come about? Because this is actually a number 4 Mark 1. And now it's got an S stamped on the side and U.S. property stamped at the top, right near the feed. And I kind of thought that was weird. I don't remember seeing that as a child. I guess it was always there, but I never really paid attention to it. So what does that mean? Why would there be U.S. property markings on a British Commonwealth issued firearm like the Lee Enfield? Well, in 1940, the UK had been at war for years, and they were having a shortage of firearms to provide to the troops of the front line, and especially post the Dunkirk debacle, there was a huge shortage. And so USA, which hadn't entered the war yet, had an abundance of natural resources and a means to produce. They hadn't had their factories bombed, etc., etc., etc. So the UK approached the US and said, we need firearms, and came to an agreement on 200,000 firearms in a cash and carry kind of deal. Basically, here's the cash, we'll ship them right now. Problem was, the UK didn't really have the money to take these firearms and to run with them. So President Roosevelt considered the fact that the UK was a very important ally, and he came up with basically a partnership kind of thing, called the Lend-Lease Act. Didn't have enough money for the UK to purchase them, so here's the deal. These, and don't forget that the USA at that time was, regarded as being a neutral country. They weren't involved with the war, although their allies were. So they had to be very careful. They didn't want to violate any treaty. They didn't want to declare an act of war by providing firearms to their allies. So they said, how about this? We will produce them. Savage produced them. The company of Savage produced 200,000 rifles, Savage Stevens. And they said, we will lend you them, but they will be stamped U.S. property and should return to the U.S. following the war. So, as we know, the USA eventually entered the war, and that land lease kind of thing, they said, well, don't worry about returning them. I'm sure that that's what happened. They said, don't worry about returning them. It's fine. You guys we're partners. They had bigger things to worry about other than that. So there was a ton of these on the market, and there was a company in Surrey, BC that grabbed a whole bunch of these and said, let's kind of turn these into a civilian version that the average Joe can go hunting with. So they took a whole bunch of them, and we end up with this configuration, which is like sporterized. So they took the stock. I don't know if they removed the stock completely and just fabricated another stock. You can see there's like some cheesy kind of checkering on one side of it. I mean, it's unfortunate that they did this, but I understand why they did it. They weren't worried about preserving the history of this. They were more worried about making a few bucks, right? There was a demand for it. These guys came back from the war. They could put these out, and they were extremely inexpensive. And in fact, just till recently, I'd say in the last 20 years, you could go into most of your gun shops and find several Lee Enfields hanging up against the wall, and they weren't really sought after and collected because there was 17 million of them produced, so they were everywhere, so people didn't really pick them up. The occasional person who saw, you know, that there was some interest in collecting them, they started picking them up, especially if they found a nice jungle carbine version or something that was used in, you know, Polynesian conflicts. They could say, wow, you know, we'll put these aside, we'll put these aside. So we got less and less and less and less. And now, I mean, to find an unmolested Lee Enfield 303 in any one of our gun shops, I mean, that's rare, rare, rare. So they are still around, but they're probably being held in private collections. And if you can get your hands on one, you'd be very fortunate. I think what I'm going to do with this, because there's some really bad paint. The bluing is not fantastic. I mean, the barrel is kind of blackened. There's no pitting, there's no rust or anything. And I know of a company that produces brand new stocks for these. So what I think I'm going to do is I would like to return it to its former glory. I would like to return it to what it was when Savage produced them and put them out there for the UK to use in the Second World War. That's what I'd like to do with it. So as you can see, like the butt plate is still there. The sight, typically, it had a folding ramp sight, which was good out to 1,300 meters. Never considered an overly accurate rifle, though. They weren't worried about that because these were a battlefield rifle. Okay, they didn't care if it had a sub 1 MOA, you know, accuracy test. What they wanted was reliability, robust, and these are that for sure. Tenfold. You can't, I mean, just look at the barrel on it. I mean, they knew that their soldiers, and because of the years of service, they were going to take some abuse, and they made them stand up to them, and they're still very fine functioning firearms today. Say that 10 times fast. So what I want to do is, because I've seen a couple of places which still sell, I don't know if they're reproduction or original, the metal banding, the clips. I want to put this back to its original configuration. It's going to take me some time to source, but I hope you guys follow along. If you'd like to see more videos like this, where I can get my hands on some other collectible firearms, and we'll talk about them, I'll do a little bit of the history for you, and so that way you guys get like a click on the button and learn a little bit. I like that myself. Maybe you guys don't. Maybe you guys just want to see rounds being fired down range. Let's talk about rounds for a second, though. So as soon as I got this, I'm like, well, I have to look for some rounds. I went to every single store that there was within driving distance, reasonable driving distance. 303 British cartridges are extremely hard to find right now. I managed to source one box of 20. One, okay, out of all the stores. And the guy didn't even want to sell me that. He was keeping them for himself, and I kind of had to like pry them out of his hands. $70 for a box of 20 rounds. It's ridiculous. If you guys know of some other places out there that are selling them cheaper, I mean, reloading right now is not even really an option because it's hard to source the materials that you need for that. So I don't know. And just I'm just looking at it as we're talking about it, but I mean, just look at that opening for the trigger. I mean, that thing is huge. They really, you know, they made this thing so well, so they knew that, you know, stress was going to be on. A soldier needed to be able to find that trigger well, get his finger in there on the trigger. I mean, the safety, huge aperture, you know, like in the heat of battle, you're going to be able to find all those things. The bolt itself, it's right there. It's easy to use, very nice. I'll put the safety on there to be able to rock it. But I mean, it's, you know, there's some slack in it, but it's a battle rifle. That's what they're there for. And they're gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. So anyway, keep following. Please hit that like, subscribe. As I said before, you're helping me out. I really appreciate it. If you have comments, I love reading the comments, especially I'm getting comments from all over the place. It would be interesting to see how far these rifles are right now. I mean, I know that I've had some people even watching from India, so I know that there must be a crap ton of these Lee Enfield 303s over there in India because they were issued as part of the Commonwealth to the soldiers. So I'd love to hear the stories where you guys have some. I'm sure everybody's got one of these that belonged to their grandfather that's, you know, leaning up against a wall in a closet somewhere on a farm. Fantastic firearms, but take care of them. These are a legacy that you can kind of hand down, to your kids, grandkids, whatever. Anyway, I'm the guy with beard, guns and gear. Hope you love this video. I love making them. As I said before, go ahead, smash, as other people on other YouTube videos, smash that like and subscribe button, and we'll see you in the future. Have a good one.